Paris, December 2, 1804. Notre Dame Cathedral holds its breath as history pauses at the altar. Pope Pius VII raises the heavy golden crown of France, his hands trembling slightly in the cold incense air. Before the pontiff can act, Napoleon Bonaparte steps forward, his eyes calm, and takes the crown into his own hands. He does not wait to be crowned, he crowns himself, and in that single deliberate motion, he tells all of Europe that destiny is not given, it is claimed. But to understand how a small boy from a rocky island came to take a crown from the hands of a pope, we must go back to the beginning. In Ajaccio, Corsica, in 1769, a boy is born in a modest stone house where the sea wind rattles the shutters. Young Napoleon is not the tallest, not the strongest, but he watches everything, and he reads like a boy possessed, memorizing maps of ancient Rome. His mother calls him restless, his teachers call him stubborn, but in his small room he moves wooden pieces across a hand-drawn map of Europe. He whispers to himself, if Alexander could build an empire from Macedonia, why not a Corsican from nothing, and that question will never leave him. At 9 years old he is sent to a harsh military school in France, mocked for his accent alone, and he learns his first great lesson, that dignity must be earned through relentless preparation. Toulon, 1793, the French Republic is crumbling, and a crucial port has fallen to the enemies of the Revolution. Generals argue in tents, their maps are soaked, their cannons are placed too far to threaten the harbor. A thin 24-year-old artillery captain named Bonaparte steps forward and says, "Give me your guns, and I will give you the harbor."
They laugh, then they listen, because his plan is brilliance itself, to drag heavy artillery through mud and place it where no one thought possible.
Within days the harbor is under fire, the opposing fleets withdraw, and a name that was unknown a week before is now on every dispatch sent to Paris. 5 years later he sails for Egypt, not only with soldiers, but with 167 scholars, astronomers, painters, and mathematicians. While other generals seek only victory, Napoleon seeks knowledge, ordering his men to sketch temples that have slept under sand for 3,000 years. In the desert near Rosetta, his engineers uncover a black stone slab covered in 3 scripts, a key that will one day unlock the language of pharaohs. At night, under a sky blazing with stars, he walks alone among his weary troops and speaks to them not of conquest, but of building a road that would one day join 2 seas. It is here the world first sees the duality that defines him, a commander who dreams of empire, and a student who dreams of eternity. By 1804 he is first consul, master of France, yet he spends his nights not with maps of battle, but with lawyers in candlelit rooms. France has 300 different laws, a chaos of old customs, and he says, we need one law, clear, fair, and the same for every citizen. For months he debates, line by line, insisting that talent should matter more than birth, that property should be protected, that merit should open doors. When the Napoleonic Code is finally sealed, it contains 7 articles that will outlast every cannon he ever forged. Today, from Louisiana to Warsaw, from Quebec to Cairo, its principles still live, proving that his greatest victory was never on a battlefield, but on parchment. December 2, 1805, dawn breaks frozen over the hills of Austerlitz, and 2 vast Allied armies believe they have trapped him. They see his right flank looking weak, thin, inviting, and they march to crush it, exactly as he hoped they would. Napoleon has hidden his strength behind a low ridge, and when the morning mist lifts, he unleashes a sudden central thrust like a hammer through glass.
In less than 9 hours the greatest coalition arrayed against him is undone, not by sheer numbers, but by timing, geometry, and an imagination that saw the battlefield as a chessboard.
His soldiers that evening lift their hats and chant, Vive l'Empereur, and for a moment, Europe seems small enough to hold in one man's hand. Yet at the height of his power, the emperor is often alone, and in his private study in the Tuileries, he keeps a small portrait of Josephine. He writes her letters that are not the words of a conqueror, but of a husband who fears he is losing the only heart that ever understood him. He writes, "I have not spent a day without loving you, I have not spent a night without holding you in my thought," and then he folds the paper and does not send it. He believes that to love deeply is to be vulnerable, and vulnerability is a luxury an emperor cannot afford. So he places the letter in a drawer, locks it, and returns to his maps, trading a moment of human tenderness for the endless weight of empire. In 1812 he leads his grand army east into Russia, chasing a decisive end that never comes. Moscow is taken, but empty, silent, and then winter descends, a vast white silence that swallows roads, wagons, and hope itself. The snow falls without pause, the wind cuts like glass, and Napoleon walks among his shivering soldiers, sharing what little warmth remains. He knows then that nature itself has overcome strategy, that even the most brilliant plan can be humbled by endless sky and endless cold. He orders the retreat not as a failure of courage, but as an act of responsibility, and as he rides ahead, he already understands his star is beginning to set. Exiled to the tiny island of Elba in 1814, the ruler of half of Europe is given a kingdom 12 miles long. The world expects him to fade, to sulk, but Napoleon rises at dawn, rolls up his sleeves, and begins to build roads, plant vineyards, and design schools. He meets with miners, fishermen, and children, asking how their lives can be improved, and the islanders who came to see a tyrant find a tireless administrator. A British visitor writes in his diary, "I met a man who was building a garden as if he were still building an empire." It is here we see the truth, that for Napoleon, power was never only about crowns, it was about the ceaseless need to create, to organize, to leave order where there was chaos. His final exile is Saint Helena, a remote rock in the Atlantic, where the wind never stops and the ocean stretches forever in every direction. Confined to a modest house called Longwood, his uniform now hangs loosely, his steps are slower, but his mind burns as brightly as ever. He dictates his memories to a loyal companion, not to excuse himself, but to explain that he wanted to unite Europe under one law, one coin, one peace. On a rainy afternoon in 1821, he traces his finger across a worn map of the world one last time, smiles faintly, and whispers, "What a romance life has been." Napoleon Bonaparte dies far from the crowns he seized and the thrones he shook, yet his code still governs, his roads still carry travelers, and his story still reminds us that ambition, when bound to vision, can redraw the destiny of nations.